During the Clone Wars, the most iconic symbols of the Republic Navy were Star Destroyers, kilometer-long wedge-shaped warships that acted as flagships, carriers, and frontline battleships. For most of the war, the Venator-class Star Destroyer was the backbone of the newly rebuilt Navy, joined midway through the war by the Victory-class and later the Imperator, Tector, and possibly Executor classes. These were the largest Republic vessels most beings were familiar with, but some even larger vessels were waiting in the wings of the Republic Navy. These titanic battleships dwarfed the Star Destroyers they led into battle, and you've likely never heard of any of them. In this video, we're going to be changing that and explain why the Republic rarely used these massive vessels.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
After the new Sith were vanquished in the 7th Battle of Ruusan, the Republic was reorganized under the Ruusan Reformations. The Reformations, among other things, completely restructured the Republic military. The Republic's central military was dissolved, replaced with the comparatively tiny judicial forces, and a system of planetary security forces was established, putting each sector in charge of its own defense. At first, PSF naval forces primarily used old Republic warships, but newer warships slowly became more common, especially in the fleets of the wealthy core worlds. While the core and the colonies weren't under threat during this period, many sectors built elaborate defense fleets featuring the newest and most powerful vessels credits could buy. These fleets were mostly for show, providing a way for wealthy worlds to show off their military power. Many new warships were built specifically for these peacock fleets, including some truly huge vessels. Around 200 years before the Clone Wars, one such vessel, Kuat Drive Yards' Praetor-class star battlecruiser, became the largest warship in service with a length of 2,500 meters. More massive vessels would soon follow, but built in small batches and sold exclusively to core world navies. The power of these massive warships was limited by the Ruusan Reformations, placed caps on hyperdrive speed and total armament. Because of this, these huge warships had very short jump ranges, and the larger they were, the less practical they became due to the armament restrictions. The core worlds that burned their state budgets on these huge warships didn't care about this, of course, they just wanted to show off. Due to the limitations of these warships, they set out during the start of the Clone Wars since they needed retrofitting to become battle-worthy. At enormous cost, some were equipped with better weapons and decent hyperdrives, while Kuat Drive Yards slowly began to churn out upgraded models for the Republic Navy. Even the upgraded vessels saw little action, however, since they were still owned by local forces far from the front lines. After the Battle of Rendili, however, the PSFs were nationalized, and from that point forward, these huge battleships finally began to see some action. There were 4 of these massive Republic battleships in total, all KDY products, 2 of which predated the war and 2 of which were first deployed mid-conflict. The first is the Praetor-class star battlecruiser, the successor to the aforementioned Praetor-class. These 4-kilometer-long behemoths were pre-Clone Wars vessels, and as such had somewhat disappointing firepower for their size, a flaw that retrofits could only do so much to correct. However, they proved extremely effective as flagships due to their incredible durability, which was bolstered even further by Clone Wars era retrofits such as improved armor. These upgrades turned the Praetor into a flying fortress, ideal for commanding vast armadas. The Praetor was perhaps the most common of the 4 ships we'll be discussing today. During the Outer Rim sieges, Praetor-class battlecruisers led invasion fleets in some of the most critical offenses. One, the Quaestor, was responsible for the destruction of an entire planet during this period, even if it was an accident. The Quaestor was one of the Republic's main flagships, tasked with leading offensives deep into Separatist space. During the final months of the war, it led an assault on Permant, one of the Confederacy's primary shipyards. The Quaestor suffered extensive damage during the battle, which ultimately caused the hyperdrive to malfunction and jump the ship directly into the planet. The resultant collision destroyed the Quaestor, shattered Permant's crust, and doused the entire planet in radiation, rendering it uninhabitable. a testament to the massive reactor power of the Praetor-class. Before we move on, we'd like to briefly discuss the Praetor-class's successor, the Praetor-class, developed during the early Imperial era. Though we have little concrete data about the original Praetor-class, we know a lot about the Praetor II, which could shed some light on the specs of its predecessor. The Praetor II was slightly larger and much more heavily armed, requiring a crew of over 100,000. It could carry over 100 starfighters and 14,000 troops, and was armed with 60 heavy quad-turbo lasers, 40 medium-turbo lasers, 10 long-range ion cannons, and 30 short-range ion cannons. That's a terrifying amount of stopping power, and if the Praetor I had even a quarter of that, it would have been formidable indeed. The next ship we have to discuss was about the same size as the Praetor, the Maelstrom-class battlecruiser. Premiered midway through the Clone Wars, the Maelstrom looked like a giant Venator with a delta-shaped hull and 2 command bridges. It could carry 15,000 troops and around 100 starfighters, much like the Praetor II, though it required less than half the crew. The Maelstrom was armed with 20 Hevo turbo laser batteries, 10 heavy ion cannons, 20 medium turbo lasers, 10 quad concussion missile launchers, and 30 proton torpedo launchers, as well as a whole lot of tractor beam emitters. This is an interesting weapons profile, to say the least. The Maelstrom's weapons were mostly ion cannons and missiles with relatively few conventional turbo lasers. The Maelstrom nonetheless had plenty of potential, and it likely would have lived up to its name on the battlefield were it not for the battlecruiser's enormous cost. Each Maelstrom cost 158 million credits, and because of this, very few were ever manufactured, leaving the Praetor as the Republic's primary battlecruiser. The Praetor and the Maelstrom were both huge and impressively destructive, but they were each only half the size of the Republic's biggest warships. Kuat Drive Yard's largest creations to date, the Mandator First and Mandator Second class star Dreadnaughts, were 8 kilometers long, the largest Republic vessels ever produced. There weren't many of these gargantuan craft in service, and they didn't see all that much action in the Clone Wars because of this, but they inspired one of the Empire's most infamous warships, the Executor-class star Dreadnought. The original Mandator-class star Dreadnought was unveiled 2 decades before the Clone Wars, meant to serve as the flagship of Kuat's home defense fleet. Only 7 were ever made, with 3 owned by the Kuat Sector Fleet, and 1 each owned by the local fleets of Ixtla, Humbarine, Anaxis, and Alsacan. The specs of the massive vessel are completely unknown, aside from that it required a colossal reactor. During the Clone Wars, only 3 of the 7 existing Mandators were retrofitted with better hyperdrives and more weapons, and the class saw very little action during the conflict. Retrofitting the Mandator-class was extraordinarily expensive and, in the opinion of KDY's engineers, more trouble than it was worth. Instead, KDY designed a new and improved version of the Star Dreadnought, the Mandator Second class, which was deployed in 19 BBY. The Mandator II was so heavily armed and armored that it was practically unstoppable, and while it had a very limited production run due to its extreme cost, those Mandator IIs that saw action kicked some serious ass. It took 1,000 of the Confederacy's Ricocent-class light destroyers to bring down just one of these behemoths. As a final note, the Mandator and Mandator II originate from legends, but contrary to what you might think, they're actually a thing in canon as well. In canon, the Mandator line continued during and after the time of the Empire, culminating in the Mandator 4th class siege Dreadnought, which featured prominently at the start of The Last Jedi. So, there you have it. 4 colossal Republic warships you've probably never heard of. If you want to take the fearsome Mandator II out for a spin, you can actually build one. The Pride of the Core in the Republic at War mod for Star Wars Empire at War Forces of Corruption, which we definitely recommend playing. Anyways, what do you think of these warships? Which is your favorite? Free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.